So I'm Charles Wood. I'm Vice President of Economic Development for the Chattanooga Chamber. I'm an Air Force brat, so I did not grow up here. I've been here about 7 years. I lived a lot of other places, but this project has been near and dear to my heart. So I got here in 12, and frankly, I've been pushing the city on acquiring the site at the very beginning. I had very rough words with some of our federal folks because, quite frankly, in my view, the Department of HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, basically allowed this site to linger and deteriorate and become a serious problem. And when the city was working to try and acquire the site, and the site was put up for a request for proposals by the Housing Authority, frankly, the company that kind of bubbled to the top as a private housing developer was a slumlord. And the examples of their projects in other places were crime infested, were not the kind of place where I would ever imagine wanting to live or wanting my children to live. And it was really, to me, most of the time when we lose an economic development project and we lose more than we win, nothing bad happens. We just don't get the project. And in my view, if we didn't do something about this site, something bad was going to happen. And I think from a neighborhood standpoint, we got heavily engaged in pushing forward with this. And I'll talk about the company and kind of go through this first, and then I want to talk a little bit about why we kind of push for manufacturing, because I know that's been a little divisive. This gives some community demographics. I'm not going to go over them. I did this for the zoning project, and I got beat up a little bit because there were, I think, folks from the neighborhood are like, we know how bad it is here. I didn't use this slide to tell the neighborhood how bad it is. I used this slide to tell our elected leadership how bad it is and how bad it is for folks who live in North Chattanooga and downtown and out in Uwallah. Because right now I'm telling you, nobody drives through this neighborhood unless they live there, right? They don't come down here because there's events. So we want to make sure that people in the rest of the community understand what's happening in East Chattanooga. So that's why this is there. Don't think it's there to beat up on people. This is there to make sure that our elected officials understand what reality really looks like. So this is the project itself. They've committed to 150 new jobs, about $60 million in investment, average wages of just shy of $50,000. And then there's, and I want to explain why we work with the companies we work with. I don't go out and get coffee shops. My son owns a coffee shop, but coffee shops don't bring new money to Chattanooga, right? They just spread the money around. So they take money that's already in Chattanooga and they put it in their pocket. They go maybe go pay somebody else. So he buys coffee from Matt Priest, which is in East Chattanooga, and so that money goes into East Chattanooga. But at the end of the day, all that money was already here anyway. So a company like Nippon Paint sells to people outside of Chattanooga. And when they sell something to Mazda, which is in Huntsville, that money leaves Huntsville and comes to Chattanooga. So that is what I'm after. So I want new money. I joke with people that in Washington, D.C., they cut up the pie, and in Chattanooga, we grow the pie. So that's the idea. It's not about how we divide it up, it's how we grow it. So that investment, that $60 million and those new jobs multiply out, right? So you have 150 new jobs, but those jobs, they get that salary and they go spend that money. They may spend it at my son's coffee shop, he may hire somebody, right? He may grow enough that Matt Priest hires somebody in East Chattanooga. So that's the 165 indirect jobs that come in addition to the 150. So at that point, you're up over 300 jobs, and there's more than $17 million worth of direct and indirect wages being paid out. So for us, we look at this in a very strategic way, and we're after the multiplier, right? And we're not gonna, I've been defined to the agenda, but it's the same concept with the TIF that we're working through right now, is that's new money in East Chattanooga, and I want to keep as much new money in East Chattanooga as possible. That's the reason for that. So this gives you just the economic impact. There's some stewardship things, and it's really hard to read in here. Effectively, Sharita kind of talked about finding a company that was going to be a fit for Chattanooga and for East Chattanooga and Avondale in particular. And so we were looking for companies that weren't going to have a negative impact in a bunch of different ways. And so this company has a good track record from an environmental standpoint. I know there are lots of naysayers that float around in the community that frankly, if there were bad things, they would have already found it. They're very committed to working through a lot of issues at their other plants, and they will do the same thing here. So the waste from the manufacturing process will be removed from the site. Nothing stays on site. And so I think that's important for people to know. From an environmental standpoint, they've shortened their process and they've switched to water-based paints. So there's, again, from an environmental standpoint, they're being good stewards from an environmental standpoint. And then the company is committed to having a LEED certified facility. And for those of you that don't know what that means, effectively LEED certified is a process you go through. There's an architectural and development process to make the least amount of impact on the natural environment. And so they've committed to that. And that could mean solar panels on the roof. That could mean environmentally sensitive windows that are going to help reduce electric costs and a host of things like that, just to give you a quick feel. So wages, I know you guys saw the average wage, and that is a lump sum of everybody that's going to work in that plant. There are a number of folks who are going to make a lot of money, and most of those are chemists. And so if you go to school and you get your undergraduate degree in chemistry, you can do pretty well at Nippon. Starting entry wage is $13 an hour, and then they range up from that. The majority of the wages are going to be in the $16 to $22 an hour range. They have committed to on-the-job training, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So, and about kind of what we need from the community to, I think, make that really work. And then there will be overtime available for some positions as well. So I've highlighted 4 positions on this chart: batch makers, resin operators, warehouse employees, and then milling. Those 4 do not require a college degree. They do not require somebody to go and have a 2-year associate's degree. So there are some entry-level pieces that come into that, and then there are there's some training that will be required when they hire people and understand that, and there's some ability to move up the chain as they go. So I think that, to me, and I know to Mayor Burke, is a big part of the reason we like this company, is they expect employees to come in, and they expect them to work, and they expect them to learn as they go, right? So continuous learning process, so that they can move up in the company. This is not a lot of jobs. 150 jobs is not a lot of jobs. And so, but for the ones we get in, we want to make sure that we're working with a company that is oriented towards economic mobility inside the company. Shreya talked a lot about the site. I won't really get into that. They want to start construction first quarter of 2020, so sometime between January and March. They want to get underway. They have a couple of different buildings that will go on the site, so this will be phased. Nobody drops $60 million on the ground at one time, unless maybe they're Volkswagen. So this will phase in over several years, which is a good thing, frankly, because it gives us time as a community to get ready. And so I think that's really important, and I kind of want to share that as we go. But this just shows you a picture of the site. They have something unique here, and my friend Helen Burnsharp would be excited about this. So if they don't hit their numbers, they pay for the whole price of the property, period. So the way this is structured is they have to hit their numbers. Now, if they don't, they're paying for the property and they have less employees, but they've at least paid the city for the value of the property, for appraised value. So this is really, I think, one of the critical components for this. The city, by the contract, is on the hook to make sure they're providing workforce support. And Councilman Byrd really kind of pushed this in the agreement. And so the company is coming in, and I'm an Air Force grad, right? I moved all over the country. When you move to a new town, you don't even know where to get your hair cut, right? You don't know where to get your hair cut. So this company is coming into a new neighborhood, a new city, and they don't have relationships and connections. And so part of this aspect in that agreement is that there's a commitment by the city that we're going to help screen and push people to the company that they can hire. And I think that's an important component to this. I mentioned the 100% clawback, and then the company has to report wages to Tennessee Department of Wages and Jobs to Tennessee Department of Labor. So they're on the hook for that and have to do that. So I'm going to back up a little bit. This site was not an easy sell. Sharita talked about us kind of winnowing through different companies, but I got to be frank. While we told some, no, you can't come here because we don't think you're fit for the neighborhood, there were a whole lot of companies that said you couldn't pay me to go there. There's no way I will invest right there, right? You all know this, there have been 3 shootings in that neighborhood in the last 2 months. And I don't mean that neighborhood, I mean like 2 blocks from
Can you
there.
please stop criminalizing our community? Please.
I'm not.
Please. You've done that several times. Crime invested, please stop.
No. When I said crime invested,
Please.
I'm not talking about y'all.
Please don't do that.
I understand.
We are saying to stop doing that, please.
Okay, we didn't ask you to stop, so let's move forward.
I apologize. No, wait, I want to apologize. I'm
You
sorry.
told him, let's go forward.
I apologize. I'm trying to explain that we had a very hard time finding companies that were willing to go to that site. So we worked very hard to find folks who we thought were going to be a good fit. And it was not an easy task. It was very difficult, quite frankly. And the rest of that site is going to be hard to find folks who are going to be willing to go on the rest of the site. And I know that's not easy to hear, but this is not an easy process. As we work through this, one of the things that we know we need to do is we need to be able to find people who are going to be able to take those jobs. So we've committed to work through our workforce development efforts and our talent side. We want to market those jobs through the elementary school that's close to the site. Our view is that anybody who has a child that's going there, they live in that neighborhood. And so we feel like that's a good path for us to start to tell people about the jobs that are created and what's up. But we need you guys to also be communicating that out to your friends and family. So the company has been willing to hire folks that have a background. They're willing to train folks up. It's a manufacturing environment, so there's a drug test component to this. So, and that's a safety issue around that. So they have to pass that. But they are willing to hire folks that have a background to go into those positions. So, but again, they're coming into a neighborhood. They don't know anyone in the neighborhood. They don't know anyone in Chattanooga. And so they're going to be reliant on the city, on the chamber, on the neighborhood to help identify people that are going to be interested in those jobs and want to work there. And from our perspective, we want as many people from the neighborhood to benefit from this as possible. So, but the only way that's going to happen is if they can get connected to the people that are there. And so I will tell you the steering committee for us is really important. And so my goal is, right, they haven't hired one person yet. They haven't turned dirt, they haven't hired a contractor, they haven't done anything yet. And so one of my goals is that when they hire an HR person, when they hire somebody in human resources, that person in human resources knows everybody by first name that's on the steering committee. Because the steering committee is going to be a way to help direct people in. City's workforce team, and Greg's here, they're going to be one of the folks that's going to help on screening and working through that process. But you guys have the ability to canvass the neighborhood. We do not. We don't have that. And so for that, we're going to be looking hard from that perspective. The company's made the commitment to be able to do that and to push to hire in the neighborhood, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted them here. But at the end of the day, they don't know anyone. So it's going to be really important. And I know I was told I couldn't take questions, but I really would like to take some questions.
No, we don't have any questions. No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Not right now. We'll have more town halls later.
Okay.
We have to move on.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Again, this section was primarily to get information about the site. I do want to make a quick note before we move on. And I appreciate the folks raising this, but I think as we move forward, making sure that There are no communities, there are no neighborhoods that are bad neighborhoods. There are neighborhoods and communities that receive this investment. There's neighborhoods and communities that may struggle, but there's not bad communities and bad neighborhoods. Appreciate the acknowledgement, appreciate the acknowledgement on Mr. Woods' end. So before we move on, as Mr. Wood mentioned, there are things that the community needs to do, commitments the community needs to make sure that there's pathways to employment. But I think the other part is, and that's part of what we're here today for, is there needs to be commitments on Nipon's end too. And so how do we facilitate that conversation where Nipon's making commitments and the community's making commitments and they're talking about it together? So the next thing we have on our agenda is Fred's going to come up and share a little bit about the canvassing that was done from the community by the community and some of what came out of that, and then we'll go into next steps.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Back in May, a group of residents and neighborhood leaders got together and decided that a deeper voice about what was happening with the area government side was in order. And we felt the only way to truly do that was to get right with our neighbors, knock on their doors, see them eyeball to eyeball, hear them mouth to ear, and record what was actually being said from our residents. It was a lot of work for a few people. It wasn't overly successful in reaching everyone. But we did obtain a little bit of information to give us a direction on what the community voice was speaking out about. Mind you, this was prior to knowing for certain that Nippon Paint was coming, and as the process has taken place, it's been a step-by-step form of evolution. We started out with a group of neighborhood leaders saying, hey, we want to make sure our residents are heard. Then that turned into, well, how do we do that? So we evolved the process to create a canvassing subcommittee. They went out, knocked on doors, and asked questions. And at the end of it, we took a tallying up of sorts of what we heard. And I wrote it down because I can't see it now. And what we heard, I'm going to do this by percentage. Do we have that slide?
I don't know where the guy is. We need our other slideshow back up.
Is he up there?
There we go.
That wasn't the one. Oh, you got it. Thank you. There we go. All right. Now, the subject matters that came up the most were job training, affordable housing, living wages, targeted hiring programs, child care facilities, and other. The percentages that matched up with that were job training was at the top, 23.93% of the small amount of people that we were able to canvass at that time. Affordable housing was 20.37%, living wages, 17.57%, targeted hiring programs, 17.9%, child care facilities, 17.101%, and others at 4.11%. Since that time, we realized that the pond was coming to our area, and so we asked ourselves, well, what do we do with the information that we've obtained so far? We decided that these targeted topics that we've heard about to this point were going to be our springboard to approach the people that were coming here today. And we chose the top 4 of these, excluding affordable housing, because that's going to be pertaining to the rest of the property of the area development site and not to the actual pond plant building and hiring process. And I would say today that brings us up to speed to where we are and to get the rest of your input. Thank you. to take over from here.
Thank you so much, Fred. And as Fred stated, this has been a lengthy process. Some of you that are here, I'm sure, were at the first town hall in March. And at that time, we were looking at ways that the community could be engaged in the process of determining what would actually be on the Tubman site. And so through all of that, and with many of us not knowing what was coming to that site, we still pushed forward, and here we are today. And so I'm very pleased that this process is in the hands of the community. And with that being said, I'll ask you to turn your attention to the inside of your program because that process is spelled out right there. And if you haven't realized it already, much of the focus is on the community. It's not about the steering committee, which I'm a part of. It's not about the city. It's not even about the company that's coming to develop the site. It's about the people in East Chattanooga. And so when you look at the process, the first step is the community's voice. And again, that started back in March, and we continued forward with all of the canvassing efforts. And here we are today to actually address the process from the standpoint of the developer that's here. And so I'm simply going to read through it with you. So the first step is getting the community's input and their voice. So East Chattanooga community members develop ideals via surveys, which Fred talked about, community meetings, which would include your neighborhood associated meetings, and even meetings like this. And this input will be used by the Tubman Opportunity Steering Committee. So again, when we talk to the company, when we're engaging with the city, we're not going with our own ideals, okay? We're not here to pull out of the air what we think should be there. We're listening to you, and we're going to say, this is what the community has said. This is what they've stated in our town hall meetings. I believe Ken also alluded to the fact that when we have our steering committee meetings, you're welcome to come there, and then afterwards, you'll be able to send emails to us also where we can field through that and see what questions and concerns have come up. And we're going to take that input and also say, hey, these are some of the things that came up with the community. Let's talk about this. What can you communicate back to us so that we can take it back to the community so that they can look it over and chew through that and let us know how we need to respond. So again, none of this happens though without the community's voice. Take number one off the plate, everything else falls. So this is very important that we're here, and again, we're grateful that you're here to further this process. But that second step, again, is the Tubman Opportunity Steering Committee. We are responsible for taking your input and developing specific requests to bring to the company, which is Nippon. The third step is that we meet with Nippon. So the steering committee, we bring that input to them and the request directly to Nippon and their officials to discuss concrete pathways to employment and other benefits for East Chattanooga residents. And the specific benefits were already stated. We're looking at, and it's on the back of your bulletin too. I don't know if it's still behind you, but it's also on the back of your bulletin. Those specific larger areas are pertaining to job training, wages and benefits, targeted hiring for area residents, and child care for those workers that will potentially be working there. And then lastly, when we have that meeting with Nippon, when we're taking your input to them, whatever feedback we receive from them or their response, then we as a committee, we are tasked with coming back to you to let you know what we've discussed in those meetings, to give you the results of what input that we've given them based on what you've told us and what they've said. And so that's number 4. The Tubman Opportunity Steering Committee will report back to the community to give updates on meetings with Nippon and to gain ongoing resident feedback. So this is not a one-time meeting. Just like the first town hall meeting wasn't a one-time meeting, this is not a one-time meeting. We want this process to continue on until we get to a place where we as a community feel comfortable with the benefits that have been laid out and where we feel comfortable that the company is willing to work with us. And let me be even more clear, and I think this was mentioned, excuse me, at the first town hall. This is not an us against them process. This is a negotiation process. So I want us all to think about this from the perspective, this isn't the big corporation and little old us down here. We are a community, right?
Right.
We're the ones that have the voice. We're the ones that have the power. So we are an equal player at the negotiating table. And so when we have these meetings, when we have these discussions, I want us to have that same frame of mind and to not feel like we're in a powerless position, but we're the ones that have the power. We're the people. When it comes to the city, they're also at the table, but we've elected those officials to be there, correct? And so we're all equal players at the table, so it's not an us against them, but it's like, how can we sit down together and hear each other and make sure that the community benefits from what's taking place? And so this process, Lord willing, if we all are involved in doing our part, it will work. And we may not always agree, but we have to stay the course. And so I just encourage you to continue to do that. And I believe Michael will be coming up to come in. Not yet. So Michael, if you'll come on up, he's going to actually take us a little bit further into digging a little bit deeper into those four specific areas. But again, I just encourage you to stay along with the process. If there's anything that you need the committee to convey back to you, just make sure to email us at that email address, and we will definitely get back to you before our next meeting. Thank you.
All right, so just to reiterate, those of us who are involved in this process believe that the best way to ensure the maximum amount of community benefits are for community leaders to negotiate directly with the company for specific contractual obligations on what those community benefits are going to look like. In order to do that, we need clarification and direction. Those commitments aren't thought out and the negotiations haven't started yet. We've come up with 4 priority issue areas based on the canvassing efforts and the multiple discussions we've had over the past 6 to 8 months. So what we're going to do right now is have an opportunity to actually act like a community, all right? In your agenda, I believe everybody should have different colored sticky notes and a pen that goes along with it. So for this next part, we're going to be asking for your feedback on each of these key issue areas. We'll have a number of facilitators come up and give a series of prompt questions about the kind of things perhaps that we all should be thinking about, and what do we need to know about the community needs, NEPON, and the perspectives for a strong negotiated settlement agreement or contract. Those are going to be color-coded. And so we're going to have 3 minutes after each prompt question for you to reach over to your neighbor and talk about what you consider to be the most important aspects of these particular topics. And then 3 minutes for you to write down your comments, your concerns, your questions. And facilitators are going to act as ushers and come down the aisles, collect those after each section, and we'll be able to put those back up. Now, the steering committee doesn't just want to know and hear your voice, we also want to know where your voice comes from. So if you are a resident of the neighborhood in East Chattanooga, if you would please write your neighborhood at the top of each of your sheets as you're turning them in. It helps us to understand specific concerns and where they're coming from. So I believe we're going to have the first individual from the steering committee come up to give prompt questions. Ken?
Thank you, Mike. Okay, as Michael was explaining to you, this is part of the session. We wanted to get some feedback from you. So I've got the first topic that we received the results back from, and that is job training. So if you pull out your pink, I am pink, pull out the pink sticky sheet, and you'll be able to write your thoughts down on the pink one. You're going to pull out your pink one. And again, as you mentioned, you can go ahead right now at the top of the pink, put your neighborhood where you're from. Okay, and job training is key. Okay, this is like our first really important issue to talk about, because the company has committed to come here, and on our part, we need to have everybody ready to take on the jobs that y'all put on the board. some of the jobs that we put on board, if not all. I would like to see us all fill the jobs from here. But we need, our part is we need to be ready. So we need to know what it's going to take to get our community ready. What kind of training do we need to see happen? Or what kind of skills we need to develop to try and be ready for the first day when they open operations. So think along these lines. Here are a couple of questions. What job training or apprenticeship programs that already exist in Chattanooga that Nippon Paint might be able to partner with for the construction and for the permanent jobs that come? Also, what are some of the common barriers to getting the training and apprenticeship opportunities that would be needed that we need to address? And the third one is, what other information about job training do we need to get from Nippon? In other words, what do we need to ask Nippon for us to do to be ready for them? They're up on the board, and as you write this down, just frame your thoughts towards, if I was starting or looking for a job or hoping to get employment, and it doesn't have to be you. You can recommend this for a friend or a neighbor. Or how do you think we need to be ready to apply for the jobs that's going to be available at Nippon Paint? Or what do you need? What do you think we need? What kind of training do you think we need to try and be ready for? I give you a couple of minutes to write your thoughts. Now, you can discuss that amongst your others too. So talk amongst your neighbor right next to you and just discuss it a little bit. I'll give you a little time to write down. But what do you think we need as far as job training at Nippon so that we'll be ready to fulfill those jobs? So just write your thoughts down on the pink slip.
Do we have time?
Yeah, I got a question. How do they mix their paint? Do they paint big so that robotic is done, or how is the paint done?
From what I understand, it is all a powder. They're going to be using a water-based paint. So, Charles, you said they were going to.
They need human or robotics is what she wants. Whether they need
It'll
human.
probably be an automated system because they'll be doing a lot, tons and tons of product. So it'll probably be an automated system. So yeah, robotics will be my guess.
The steering committee will be communicating with Nippon about what skills
Pass him the phone.
are required for their position as well.
The question was that Nippon Paint will be in constant contact with us on trying to determine what kind of jobs that they will have available
What skills they're
and what skills that